Good afternoon, everyone. It's a privilege to welcome you here to our parallel session on Ridge to Reef. I do hope you know what ridge means. Ridge, right from the ridge, right up to the coastal area. Building climate resilience for our community, Pacific community. As we gather here from day before yesterday, in the heart of Pacific, we embrace the unique relationship between our mountain terrains and coastal ecosystems, both of which are vital for the resilience of our communities. The Pacific is renowned for its heartbreaking landscapes, but it is also a region profoundly affected by the impacts of climate change. From increased rainfall and landslides in our highlands to rising sea levels and coastal erosion, the challenges we face are interconnected. Thus, it is essential that our approach to climate resilience encompasses both the upland and the ecosystem around the coastal area. In this session, we will explore innovative strategies and collaborative practices that empower our local communities in building resilience. We will discuss how integrated coastal resource management, sustainable agriculture practices, and community-led initiatives can bolster our ability to adapt and thrive amid these challenges. I encourage all participants to share their experiences and insights as we delve into how we can strengthen adaptive strategies from the reach of our islands to the depth of our reefs. So what we have today is 6 PhD students who have undertaken very detailed research relating to oceans and our community and with regard to climate resilience. And each one of them will have 15 minutes. So the format of the presentation today is that each presenter, each researcher, each PhD student will get 15 minutes, up to 15 minutes. So you have got a total of 15 minutes to make a presentation. We will take questions at the end. Because we've got 6 presentations, we want to get over the presentations. And at the end of the presentation, I'll invite back all the presenters here, and then we will open it up for questions. Yeah. So we want to start. The first presenter is Martha Manaka. She will come and explain her research area and present her findings. So Martha, can you please go ahead? I will divide you in 3 minutes.
Next one. Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. The title of my presentation is Interdisciplinarity as a Progressive Approach towards Supporting Communities in Manage marine managed areas. My presentation will be guided by the following bullet points: environmental pollution, background, a bit of readings, interdisciplinarity, and the step-by-step process that this research attempts, and going forward. I'd like to highlight this illustration as a problem. You will note from here, I've highlighted these are island in Solomon Islands. And in this island, you will note customary land. There's an oil spill here on waterways. There's an oil spill in the marine areas, traveling boats within islands, and oil spill from logging and mining in Solomon Islands. So I'd like to pose that in this picture, you will note that in this one big island, there's multiple developments that is happening there. So we have the mining development that's occurring, as well as logging. And we also have some seaweed conservation programs in this one particular illustration. So you will note, I'm trying to emphasize here that there's multiple developments in one region. And there are multiple stakeholders that are involved in the different developments that are happening. I'd like to, picturing that illustration that I just presented, I'd like to point out that the environmental pollution is an ongoing problem in the Pacific, and probably we would agree that it happens all around the world. Yeah? So the lifespan of all environmental pollution is a problem in Solomon Islands. And one of the big problems in the country is the implementation of laws, domestic laws. We have laws in place, but not all implemented. And it is a main challenge in the country. And one of the reasons is because of the scatteredness of islands in Solomon Islands. And we know that in the Pacific, a lot of the islands are scattered everywhere. So in terms of infrastructure, to be able to bring the service from the main, where the administration is, to the people in the communities is a big problem. And so I say that the human resource capacity is very limited in Solomon Islands. And so I pose here, and I'd like to pose here why interdisciplinarity. Yeah, I've highlighted some literature reviews in terms of how interdisciplinarity has developed over time. Yeah, and these are some of the points in green I've highlighted. Interdisciplinarity, I chose in a topical focus, and we know that environmental pollution is an ongoing problem. It's a wicked problem. I would regard it as a wicked problem because it exists for a very long time. And so interdisciplinarity involves a combination of different experts from different disciplines to be able to tackle this problem from different angles. And so that is why this research tries to attempt to have interdisciplinarity as part of its method to be able to address this problem of environmental pollution, specifically for Solomon Islands. And I also wanted to support why I wanted to use interdisciplinarity as a methodological framework. Some Pacific researchers have already opened a pathway to use interdisciplinarity as a methodological framework to address some problems. And for this specific research, the use of this interdisciplinarity as a methodological framework goes towards trying to approach different stakeholders who are involved in the development of logging and mining to be able to address the end consequence, which is the environmental pollution. And so I've highlighted here Vunibola Suliasi and Edward Hivading. These are researchers who have done their research in the Pacific and have applied interdisciplinarity. Specifically, my case studies on oil spill. So I've picked this topic, oil spill, because it's a lingering problem in Solomon Islands. As I've mentioned, the logging and mining continues to happen, and so oil spill is ongoing in the country. Although not much highlight has been done to cover this specific oil spill, and that is why I picked it up. A lot of communities in the Solomon Islands continue to experience oil spill, and I've observed that the oil spill is silently occurring, but not much attention has been paid to address this, specifically on individual communities where logging and mining is happening. And so part of my case study is to involve environmental science experts and legal experts to be able to address oil spill in Solomon Islands. And including part of this case study, I also attempted to involve participants from the government stakeholders, the private sector, the NGOs, and the communities itself. So, all these different actors will have or will create some form of assistance to provide to communities when the problem of oil spill happens in various communities in Solomon Islands. This is the fieldwork that has been carried out in 2023, December. You will note these are some of the pictures that were taken on field sites in Solomon Islands. You will note here boats traveling in coastal areas and ended up running aground on marine areas in Solomon Islands. Some badgers being dragged by dragging boats and ended up running aground as well. This is an example of it. After logging operations, there is a process where companies ought to do rehabilitations after logging operations. And part of the rehabilitation is just leaving machineries inside the land areas where the operations are occurring, and leaving also cans of oil that were used for machines that were used for logging operations. And here we have a boat that has sank in one of the coastal marine areas in Solomon Islands. So you will note I've tried to capture all the I've captured all the developments that are happening in Solomon Islands that ended up spilling oil and in Solomon Islands, and most of the communities in the country attempt to try and solve attempts to approach government stakeholders, private sectors, provincial government administrations for support, and most of the time the help is not available, or some communities do get assistance, but not all of them get the support that they needed. And so I also raised here some of the comments from the participants that I've interviewed, and these are some of the comments that they make. One of the participants that I've interviewed from the village said, this ship running aground pollutes our area, and we did try to approach the government or stakeholders that are involved in developments like logging and mining, but we were not able to get help. In another situation here, the participant said we did call for help, but it took a long time for help to come or help to arrive. Here are some of the participants from the village that I attended. The number of oil spills, they know the number of spills, and they also took me to the sites where operations had been done and oil spills that had occurred. This one is a dumping area for logging. So this is what's normally happening after every logging operations in the country. Once a machinery breaks down, they are not transported back to where they come from. They are left in the customary land areas of the communities, and this affects where the communities normally work. Because sometimes, if too much rain happens, the spilling of the oil goes into the river and affects their water sources. So you'll note from my study, it's specifically on oil pollution in Solomon Islands. As I mentioned, oil spill as part of the environmental pollution is an uncertain problem. And that is why, in order to address this wicked problem, an interdisciplinary approach would in some way provide a resolution to address this systematic or this lingering problem in the Solomon Islands, and as well as other Pacific islands who are encountering environmental pollution, specifically oil spills within their specific regions. Part of my interview, I've done a structured interview for stakeholders who are institutionalized, like the government, the private sector, and the NGOs. But for the people in the village, I've used unstructured interview, and I'd like to label that as talk story. It's allowing the communities to tell me the story, and for me to be able to grasp what's actually happening and how they actually address oil spilling when it actually occurs in the area. And last part here is on reporting and information archiving. I think this is an important part that this study would also like to highlight. Reporting back to what has been researched is important for researchers in the Pacific. I think it's a situation where once research happens, normally the communities that do not really know what happened after the research. So I've highlighted here as part of my research that it's important to report back on what is the researchers finding back to the communities, so they are aware of what are the actual potential support that they can actually receive outside. And these are my references. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Martha. She spoke on interdisciplinary approach towards supporting communities with regard to marine management practices. Our next speaker is Ms. Sandhya Kumari. And she's going to speak on her research with regard to displacement of communities, with particular reference to Banaban and Kiribati community. Sandhya, you have got 15 minutes.
Is this one?
Good everyone. Today I will present a brief overview of my research based on the topic tracing the effects of displacement, ocean knowledge documentation in the Banaban and Kiribati dialects. So my study explores the concept of displacement, both in terms of historical events and future projections, and highlights the importance of documenting ocean knowledge through the speaker's indigenous language. The research will employ an interdisciplinary approach that integrates linguistic analysis, environmental studies, and ethnographic research to investigate the perspectives of the displaced people of Panape and the possible erosion of customary ocean knowledge as a result of forced migration. The project will focus on recording and conserving the distinctive linguistic expressions associated with the ocean, such as indigenous names of marine animals, customary fishing methods, and ecological observations by working with the local communities and involving the speakers of the indigenous languages. So these are my two study areas, Rembi Island and Kiribati. I chose the two islands because they each speak a variety of the Kiribati language, which results in a dialect chain. And Panape has a history of displacement, while Kiribati may face displacement due to climate change. While going to Kiribati may be ideal for this study, I will have to interview the Kiribati people locally, mainly in the Nandi and Lautoka area. Before I continue any further, let me ask rhetorically, how many of us grew up listening to stories, legends, and myths about our ancestors, the spiritual realms and ancestral gods? Which stories are still remembered or passed down, and why? My study delves into the historical aspects of creation, journeying, and migration amongst the Banabans and Gilbertese. I begin with the Banaban version of creation and existence, which sounds overly supernatural, involving spirits and ancient Banaban gods, and may lack scientific evidence. However, these stories fall in the genre of oral traditions for a specific people. In this slide, I've included the stingray, which represents the ancient Banaban goddess, namely Siswapine. And she is believed to have protected the Banabans from Dakwanga's rage. And Dakwanga, the Fijian shark god, while they journeyed into Fiji in 1945. She symbolizes bravery, compassion, resilience, and the Banaban diaspora overall. The story of Tererepe, the second fish, that is the Sanga fish. I hope the Fijians are able to identify. So the story of Tererepe, on the other hand, depicts the story of creation and evolution according to the Banabans and provides historical relations between the Banabans, Gilbertese, and the Samoans. Moving on, these are my three major research questions. How does displacement impact the language and culture of the two islands concerned? Has displacement impacted the indigenous communities in the preservation and transmission of traditional ocean knowledge and indigenous language, and to what extent? And how does the old and new knowledge about the ocean build resilience towards climate change issues and the safeguarding of the indigenous language and knowledge amongst the already displaced Banabans and the potentially displaced Kiribati communities? In my methodology, I have used the mixed methods approach. So in my study, I've decided to use specific research methodologies such as Tekaraki, which is equivalent to Talanoa from the Fijian framework, but in the Banaban context, to underscore the true essence of narrativizing. In the Banaban context, Karaki has a more informal connotation to the notion of storytelling and engages people in different forms of narratives, which may be incidental, factual, made up, or even gossip, whilst also accommodating more serious topics. So Karaki, rather than structured interviews, will be used to request for knowledge, following certain cultural protocols of getting to know the interlocutor first and gaining their trust based on insider or outsider relationships. Selected participants who are mainly engaged with the marine resources will be approached for longer follow-up in-depth interviews. And the questionnaire is designed systematically targeting specific historical and linguistic domains, including ocean knowledge and climate change. And my last method is personal observation, corporally focused mode of inquiry, where I observe body movement when netting or fishing or weaving or tying of a fishing hook line is done. My research so far. Apparently, my research is a work in progress. I have only reached a fieldwork stage. Data collection has been successful in Rembi for the Banaban participants. I've managed to document significant information on traditional ocean knowledge and some significant cultural aspects of engagement with both the ocean and the land resources, and indigenous lexical items belonging to the Barnaban language repertoire. I'm getting into some forms of insight of indigenous linguistic data, but this is just the beginning. Challenges. So to reach my participants, particularly on Rembe Island, it required a lot of traveling through various transportation means, one of which is a boat, and adverse weather conditions interrupted traveling and caused some delays. It was rather impossible to find the original Barnaban language speakers, as language attrition has already started to happen. However, I sought information from older participants in the form of narratives, songs, descriptions of cultural skills, and traditional dances. Another challenge is the cultural taboos that the people hold in terms of sharing their culture and traditional knowledge with someone they are not well acquainted with. So good rapport and gaining the trust of the participants, as mentioned earlier, was paramount. Following strict cultural protocols was challenging, but I am well acquainted with them, and here my language skills have been useful as I am also a speaker of their language. I have not been able to get my research permit for Kiribati, which is why I had to opt for another alternative, and I will be recruiting my participants locally and some virtually. Research goals. So through this research, I aim to preserve indigenous languages, particularly the Barnaban dialect, which has not received much attention, especially in ethnologue. And if you may wonder, ethnologue is the ultimate source of information on the world's languages. Also enabling revitalization, I will document and store lexical items based on the ocean knowledge from both dialects into Flex. And Flex is a software where linguists are able to feed in data, linguistic data, and they are able to generate online resources such as online dictionaries. So I aim to capture traditional ecological and ocean knowledge and facilitate access to this knowledge to the local communities to enable data-driven and sustainable conservation practices. Informing policy and decision-making, ocean knowledge documentation supports evidence-based policies and decisions in relation to climate change issues and climate change adaptation. And finally, a comprehensive language documentation database centered on information related to the ocean and increased understanding of the significance of indigenous languages in ocean conservation and the creation of community-driven initiatives to protect and revive endangered languages are among the anticipated results of this research. In the end, this study aims to support linguistic diversity, build cultural resilience, and aid in the sustainable management of our seas in the face of environmental change and displacement. Additionally, my theoretical framework is historical linguistics, and historical linguistics is the study of how languages change over time, subsumes both the general study of language change and the history of specific languages and language families. The rest of the information are generally a section of my literature review. And that is it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandhya. Thank you very much. Excellent presentation. We got to the Banaban and the Kiribati community with the language dimension overshadowing the project. Our next presenter is Kiali Molu. Kiali Molu will present his research on the notion of independent sovereign state vis-a-vis how it could prevail or not prevail with respect to climate change. Kelly, thank you. 15 minutes.
Second on top. Yeah, thank you very much. Before I start, I also want to acknowledge sponsors of our project, the Norway government and the people of Norway, who have rendered their support in financially supporting our program. So today I'm just going to briefly talk about part of my overall project, and I'm going to talk about the threat of sea level rise to Tuvalu existence. And just before I start I want to put the picture up there to give you a clear indication of how Tuvalu is battling the issue of climate change, particularly climate-induced sea level rise. That was a picture taken earlier this year in the capital of the country during the king tide season, where the waves breaks into the main road. So just from that picture, you can see or foresee how Tuvalu is struggling with the issue of climate change and sea level rise. And below is an excerpt that I got from the Tuvalu Prime Minister's statement during the Pacific Forum leaders meeting with the UN Secretary General in the margin of the UNGA last September this year. And this is what I'm going to talk about, just the why and why Tuvalu continue to advocate and elevate the issue of climate change and sea level rise in the regional and international state. Some discourse on the statehood and sovereignty to again give you an idea of why the issue is so important to us, and what we're doing, what Tuvalu and the government are doing in the national, regional, and the international states to combat the issue. And then I'll briefly talk about my research, the focus of my research, and what I want to get out of it. So here is why Tuvalu continue to focus on the issue of sea level rise. You can look at the diagram up there. It's a projected tidal inundation of Tuvalu in the next 50 years and 100 years. So if global emissions are not reduced to an acceptable level in 50 years' time, look at the second panel. That's how the capital will look like. Flooded. 50% of the land territory will be flooded. By 2100, if global emission continues in its current trend, 95% of the territory will be underwater. So you can see why we continue to talk about, even though people might think, oh, we had enough. We had enough talking about climate change, sea level rise. But this is why we are a low island nation, very prone to natural disasters. There's a lot of, the weather has been very inconsistent for the last couple of decades. We continuously have a decline in rainwater, which is our main source of water. Cyclones are becoming more destructive. And of course, our ancestors. We have burial grounds back in 2015 that were being dug up by storm surges during the cyclone Pam, I believe, in two of the islands. And of course, as I just mentioned, submerging territories. And as that happens, land is arising. We had a project with UNDP some years back, and we found out that the coastal erosion meant that people or families who are living in the coast are moving inland, resulting in conflicts with their families. In the case of Tuvalu, we don't own land as an individual. We own land as a collective. So as you mentioned, as a family member who lives in the coast moving, the other family member are starting to push back on why you intruding my piece of land. So all these issues are becoming very common now in the Tuvalu context. And of course, there's the issue of food security, water security. We no longer can use underground water. That's why we depend largely on rainwater. And here's some global discourse on statehood and sovereignty, just to also give you an idea of the why. So in international law, a state is required to meet these 4 criteria, which is a permanent population. You have a government, a territory, and the ability for your government to forge diplomatic relations with other states. If one of those criteria is not met, then you have a problem with your sovereignty. Of course, this is clearly stated under the Montevideo Convention on the Rights and Duties of States, which is an international legal framework. And as in the case of Tuvalu, as you lose your defined territory, there will be implication for your sovereignty. In political science, this is how sovereignties look like. It is the idea that a state or governing body has the highest authority and power within its own territory. So in the medieval age, you can think about a king. That's how you can look at the state now, where a king is sovereign, who gives power to its people and to the land. And under international law, this is a practical understanding of sovereignty. You have the ability to make law, which is the government, enforce those laws, who enters and stays in the country, be self-sufficient within certain territory, your independence on your forestry policy dealings, and the rest. So what happened if sovereignty, to your sovereignty, to a state sovereignty, when one of the criteria of statehood is under threat or dissolved? There are countless implications you can find, but these are the 4 that I came up with. Loss of diplomatic recognition. As your status as a state deteriorate or loss, it will result in other diplomatic bilateral states of the country pulling out, and as a result, you lose sovereignty. It may not happen in the context of Tuvalu as we continue the issue of sea levels rise, but the case of Yugoslavia provide a clear understanding of how your sovereignty may be lost. And it also means that we don't have support in terms of development for the country when you're no longer recognized diplomatically. And then we can also have humanitarian issues, crisis, mass or forced migration. We may end up being climate refugees. And we all know that if you become a climate refugee, you become a second-class citizen in another foreign land. And then there's a case of intervention by external actors or powerful nations. Again, it may not happen, but if it happens, we may again become a protectorate or territories, as in our time of colonial, where Tuvalu was under the Gilbert and Ellice Island, under the British colony. An economic disruption. Apparently, when you don't have sovereignty, the government won't be able to regulate the economy, and which will lead to black markets, tax evasions, and leading to loss of investment and sanctions. Again, maybe different context, but you can look at the case of Cuba, where it's still being under sanction by the United States economic embargo. So just some case to give you an idea of what happened to our statehood if our to our sovereignty if our statehood is under threat. So what does our government do, or the people? What does the Tuvaluan people do? So I break this down into the national, regional, and international level. Nationally, last year, the Parliament passed the new constitution, which it is inside the constitution, it pins down the coordinates of Tuvalu maritime boundaries. The first in the world, I was told by some legal experts. So that's one way we're doing nationally, which means when our territories go underwater, our maritime boundaries recognized and maintained. And through diplomatic recognition, every country that wants to establish diplomatic relation with Tuvalu have to acknowledge and agree that, and sign to agree that Tuvalu statehood will be permanent before we forge the diplomatic relations. And also there's migration pathways that we've ventured into. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about the Fallibility Treaty, which was signed by Australia and Tuvalu, regarding Tuvalu applying to become permanent residents of Australia, but doesn't need to move there. And recently we spearheaded with some other island states, the declaration at the forum, with forum leaders. And then the international level, we continue with our fight. And recently in the UNGA, Tuvalu and the AOCs signed a declaration on sea level rise and statehood. Also, for the first time, UNGA have put sea level rise on the agenda. And here's my research focus, the viability of maintaining the status of an independent sovereign state terra firma due to sea level rise, focusing on Tuvalu. My approach to this study is transdisciplinary. It's because I believe that transdisciplinary approach to research integrates perspective methods and knowledge from various disciplines to address complex societal, scientific, or technological challenges. This approach transcends traditional discipline boundaries, fostering collaboration between academic researchers, practitioners, and stakeholders from diverse fields to create holistic solutions. And that's my proposed outcome. A bit ambitious at this stage, but that's where the project is leading to. And those are just a picture from my home island, just to give you an idea of the elevation of the island and what we have in the land. Thank you.
Very interesting presentation about what could be the consequence of sea level rise, a direct challenge to the notion of statehood. Our next presenter is PhD student Williame Wakapuni on climate resilience. Williame, you have 15 minutes.
Thank you. Otua, Motonga, Kohoku Tofia. God and Tonga are my inheritance. My name is William Wakapuna, and I know that the movie of Moana is out today. So I would like you to call me Moana because it's a part of my name, Moana there. Sorry. Okay. To start, as I step in one of my participants' office, introducing myself and talking about climate change and education and the adversities of climate change. And these participants replied in the very first, this open up with this Bible verses, and I'd like to read it out as for the introduction of my Matthew 24, 29, 31. Soon after the trouble of those days, the sun will grow dark, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from the sky, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Without no explanation, he continued on to the next one. Luke 21, 25, 26. And there will be signs in sun and moon and stars, and on the earth distress of nations in perplexity because of the roaring of the sea and the waves, people fainting with fear and with foreboding of what is coming on the world, for the powers of the heavens will be shaken. He extended, the earth is losing its foundation. The Antarctic and Arctic regions are no longer fulfilling their natural roles of freezing and crystallization, and the ozone layer is no longer functioning effectively. The Bible has prophesied these uncertainties and complexities of the world we now refer to as climate change 2,000 years ago. That's what we refer today as climate change. The next slide is about the Tonga and the Tongan Bible and the Tongan prophecy. It looks like they have some common components there. Now Tonga, right here we call Ono Aho, or the era of twilight. That's the era of daylight. That's the past. And we call today and the future as Ono Po. That's the era of darkness. So we are living now in the era of darkness. So going to the background of my topic that's called and Tonga, my inheritance. It was found in the first peace gathering of the king and the chiefs after the unification of Tonga in 1839. And God and Tonga, my inheritance, is the dedication of Tonga and its people to the Christian God by King George I. Is a history proudly told and retold. And today I'm telling the same story almost 200 years or over 200 years. We still tell the story of this God and Tonga, my inheritance. God and Tonga, my inheritance became the motto of the Tongan coat of arms in 1875 and are forever enshrined in the national memory. I'd like to take you to some of this video here. I hope it will, that I can play this, the ID. Oh, sorry. And the next video, just to that's the Hunga Tonga Hunga Ha'apai.
On January 15th, 2022, the Hunga volcano, located 36 nautical miles northwest of Tonga in the southwest Pacific Ocean, erupted in an extraordinary manner. The explosive eruption unleashed an atmospheric pressure wave which was recorded around the world. It was this pressure wave that generated the tsunami observed in faraway places such as New Zealand, Japan, California, South America, the Caribbean, and even Europe. In the region close to the volcano, it was a different story. Here, the tsunami was primarily generated by the effects of the eruption itself, which displaced the surrounding ocean water through explosions, submarine landslides, and the collapse of the volcano's underwater caldera, with a volume estimated at approximately 7 cubic kilometers. The resulting tsunami was highly complex and is still the subject of scientific debate. However, the end result was a series of waves that began hitting the western coast of Tonga Tapu around 4:15 p.m. local time, with the largest surge of over 20 meters coming ashore sometime after 6 p.m. After the event, interviews conducted with eyewitnesses and survivors from the villages of Hatafu and Kanakapolu on the Hihifo Peninsula of western Tonga Tapu have helped us to better understand the details of the tsunami effects, as well as how and when the tsunami was generated. Their stories also provide important reminders on what to do and sometimes what not to do in a tsunami situation when every action could be the difference between life and death.
Here are some of the big pictures and why resilient education is vital for Tonga. And these are pictures from the Hunga Tonga Hunga Ha'apai volcanic eruption. These are recent pictures from the flooding in Tonga and inflation. That's economic impacts. The inflation in Tonga, the local goods very high price. The price is very high. Where on the map is Tonga? So I would like to take you there. Just a few seconds. So enjoy your flight. Our late beloved Kun Salotetopo referred to Tonga as Apimoana, home in the vast ocean, in a song that commemorated the British Queen's visit to Tonga in 1953. Therefore, we are the children of the ocean. If Mother Ocean is disturbed, Tongans are affected. Given all the issues at hand, what type of education does Tonga require? That's the question. Education for Tonga today and tomorrow, based on the survey conducted after the Hunga Tonga Hunga Ha'apai tragedy. Two cornerstone themes were collected. First, Stalotu, the Christian religion. God and Tonga are my inheritance. Second is the Fonua, learn of Tonga. So the education that the Tongans want for the Tonga is the core and Tonga. So I think I will skip this one. Yeah. So this Tonga education for resilient traditional early warning system. The breadfruit is what we call here in Fiji, udo, or bread moi in Tongan. So short stem, if you take a look at the one that right, the short stem versus the long stem, and the explanation is there. The short stem indicates how the breadfruit tree senses its environment and develops this trait as a strategy to resilience in preparation for upcoming cyclones. So on my way here, I take a look at so many breadfruits on the way, and all the breadfruits are in this site. So expectation, there will be no cyclone this year. The long stems suggest that even though there may be an abundance of breadfruit during the season, it doesn't necessarily mean that a cyclone is approaching. This is the literature. The abundance of breadfruit, cyclone will appear, but it's not. You have to look at this, the stem, the short stem and the long stem. And the other one is the black-bellied storm bedroll. With those two distinct features. The first one, low flying with flapping wings, indicates that a severe cyclone is approaching the island, prompting the black-bellied storm bedroll to search for food as a preparedness strategy for impending natural disaster. And if the black-bellied storm bedroll is flying high like this, high gliding wings, suggests that the incoming wind from the disaster may not cause damages. This is a resilient farming calendar for the Tongans. So the Tongans have 14 months. And the scientific calendar is only 12 months. So I have no time to that one. Yeah, and to respond, we need to integrate all these indigenous knowledge into the national curricula. Thank you.
Another fascinating presentation. Thank you, Williame. We'll now move on to Donny Waningolo, who will speak on the blue economy. Thank you, Donny. You have 15 minutes.
Nakambula, everybody. I am Donny. So I'll start my presentation by, in a form of a story tell in a nutshell what I'm doing in my study. So a story of a Vanua without a plan. In a Matangali surrounded by fertile land and rolling hills, the people lived off the land as their ancestors had for generations. But over time, challenges began to rise. A road built nearby brought more traffic and also pollution. Forests were cleared to make way for farms and intensive urban developments, leading to soil erosion and flooding. A factory built upstream polluted the waterways, killing fish and ruining the landowners' water supply. As these issues piled up, the village elders held consecutive meetings, each focused on a single problem: One day they debated on how to stop the floods. The next, they argued about the declining crop yields. Each decision solved one issue, but more problems started to arise from that one issue. Then a drought struck, followed by a cyclone that destroyed our homes and the fields, affecting their daily livelihoods. The landowners were left wondering why they were facing so many problems all at one time. An elder lamented, "We are surrounded by riches. We have all the land, but our children go hungry. We own the land, yet we live in poverty." One of the landowners stood up and said, "We need to think about how all these problems are connected. The land, the river, the forest, and the people. They are all part of the same system. We can't fix one without thinking about the others." Then a team of community planners, well-versed in Fijian traditions and global best practices, stepped in to help this community. They worked with the people, listening to their stories and learning their ways. Together, they created a plan that protected the forests, that improved their farming techniques, built resilient homes, and developed ecotourism initiatives rooted in the Vanua, their land, the Whenua, the Fonua, where tourists learned about the Fijian culture and also contributed to the local revenue. They also set rules for land use that ensured that everyone, including the future generations, would have clean water. They would have fertile soil and taboo lands that were preserved for sensitive areas to their culture and the ecosystems of the Vanua. The landowners then discovered that planning wasn't about taking control away from them. Rather, it was about empowering them to solve problems as a community, planning and managing their own development, and prepare for the uncertainties of the future. And so that, in a nutshell, is what I am trying to pursue in my research. So why is planning important? The contemporary world faces pressing and complex changes and uncertainties. I summarize 5 main things that planners look forward to in planning. How ready are we against the future threats of climate change, of war, of food security, of a pandemic, and national development plan? In my research, I use the term formal planning instead of urban and regional planning, aiming to propose a more contextualized form of planning for Fiji. This form of planning integrates contemporary planning with traditional knowledge and practices. In Fiji, where there is about 16,000 land-owning units or clans that own 90% of Fiji's resources, and coastal areas accommodate for over 2/3 of the population and development, formal planning is ever more critical for safeguarding land and ocean-dependent resources and enhancing the well-being of our people and landowners. The statistics present a paradox. 70% of our people that live below poverty line are Itoke, who apparently own 90% of the resources. Formal planning, successful in improving livelihoods and quality of life in many nations, has not mirrored similar results for Fiji. Why is that the case? In contrast, Singapore, with limited natural resources and a small landmass, transformed its economy and quality of life in just 2 decades by strategically utilizing people-centered formal planning. From 65 to 1985, Singapore produced well-designed, inclusive, people-centered urban policies, master plans, education reforms, and industrial strategies to elevate its people from poverty to a developed status. This rapid growth demonstrates that when formal planning is effectively implemented, even countries with scarce resources can achieve substantial and sustainable improvements in livelihoods, providing a valuable lesson for Fiji. So is our approach to formal planning flawed in Fiji, or are our methods flawed, outdated? Has our Westminster form of formal planning, inherited from our colonial past, masked or suppressed indigeneity of Wakavanua from our planning processes, exacerbating in the process the resource-rich, cash-poor dilemma for our landowners? These are the questions that the study hopes to achieve. Formal planning has become a rather technical procedure followed by agencies, they unintentionally dispowering our landowners regarding the true value of their land and development opportunities. Inefficient land use exacerbates poverty and environmental degradation, hindering the country's quest for sustainable development efforts. With the current approach and capacity, the Itoke Land Trust Board, which is the key organization in Fiji responsible for managing the control of all Itoke land, would take at least 80 years to plan the entire nation. Wouldn't it be quicker and more efficient for landowners to take the lead role instead of planning and managing their own communities, rather than being held ransom by what seems to be a colonial bureaucratic type of planning and decision-making process that's top-down? Can we do it, and how can we do it better? Additionally, through the TLTB, distributes an income of around 100 million per year in LOU income and royalties. So a quick analysis of the current Itoke population, over 16,000 LOU units, we'll see that the per capita from the income through the use of the resources themselves earn about $3.59 per week, which in comparison to the basic needs poverty line of $41 and the minimum wage of $160 per week is very less. There is therefore a need to explore a model of formal planning tailored to Fiji's unique context. This involves investigating how formal planning process can integrate indigeneity and traditional knowledge into mainstream planning practices, promoting sustainable growth and desirable development outcomes for landowners. In this model that I'm using in my study, Sherry Einstein's people's-led of participation argues using analogy of the ladder that where people are elevated to have more power to participate in the planning process, there's more success to the plans that they come up with. That the more effective plans are the ones where there is greater citizen participation and where planning process empowers the voiceless and the have-nots. For Fiji's context, however, I have flipped the ladder and adapted it into a form of a continuum where you transition from planning for the people, agency-led, to planning with the people, community-centered planning, to ideally what we need to find out is planning by the people, entirely run by the people themselves. Co-production of knowledge by integrating science and traditional knowledge into public policy has been effective in many places. An illustrative case is the Maori experience, where the Whanganui River was granted the same legal rights as a human being. This serves as evidence of the profound connections between people and the environment, stressing the importance of preserving and integrating such relationships into public policy and legislation. Integrating these perspectives is essential for achieving environmental justice and promoting resilience in an increasingly interconnected world. The iwi management plan are strategic documents developed by the iwi, or the Maori clans or the tribes, aimed at guiding the sustainable management and use of their resources within their ancestral territories. It reflects Maori principles of environmental stewardship, which are deeply rooted in the worldview of cultural values. By tailoring formal planning to LOUs, this research aims to provide practical insights for informed policy, number one, and legislative considerations for the Itaukei Land Trust Board and other key agencies in the planning and development field. It may also empower landowners to play a stronger role in formal planning, serving as a knowledge transfer tool for Fiji's context. The theoretical contributions of my research may include identifying opportunities for customary landowners to actively participate in formal planning, potentially reshaping grassroots development. This approach, unique to Fiji's customary land, could revolutionize resource management, fostering a harmonized approach benefiting all stakeholders. If adopted, this approach could ensure that Fiji is comprehensively planned, promoting sustainable resource management across both rural and urban areas, and from the mountains to the sea. The profession and discipline of formal land use planning could pave the way for our landowners to take the lead in managing community-led grassroots development. This would not only elevate their livelihoods, but also better equip them to address challenges such as climate change, development pressures, and resource management. Ultimately, this approach would contribute to sustainable growth and a more resilient future for our nation. I just want to end the presentation with a Cree Indian proverb which justifies the need and the importance of planning. It says, when only the last tree has died, the last river poisoned, the last fish caught, will we realize that we cannot eat money. Hence the need to plan. Navalu.
Thank you. Thank you, Don. Our last presenter is Silila Bawan. She'll present her paper on managing change and uncertainties in Tonga with regard to sustainable land management. Silila, you have 15 minutes.
Maloa lele and good afternoon. Let's see, yeah. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge the Norway Pacific Ocean and Climate Scholarship Program who funded this research program, but also the Global Development Network for the opportunity to present in this conference. I'm also going to practice my storytelling because Catherine is here to assess and give my certificate after this, right, Catherine? Sorry. So Tonga had a political unrest back in 2006, which resulted in a lot of damaged buildings within our small business center within Nuku'alofa, our capital. These buildings belong to government, people, businesses, churches, and others. And after the riot, the government of Tonga decided to loan an enormous amount of money from China to help rebuilding our town center. When the loan was being approved and mobilized, the government also decided to establish an office within the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources called the Planning and Urban Management Agency, or PUMA for short. And the core function of this office was to plan, develop, and manage the rebuilding project of our little town center. In 2010, fate landed me in the Puma office, and I have since been working with the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources. One of the core principles when I was at this Puma office was to carry out urban planning work. During our urban planning work was participatory planning. I think Tony had just mentioned planning with the people. And this means that the voices of everyone within the society, within Tonga, in my case, will be taken into account and will be reflected in plans and in the society. This was when I decided that I will fulfill my passion to help the people of Tonga by making sure that their land resources are being put into the best use, and that in return it will contribute or help their standard of living to become better, and hence better lives for children and their grandchildren in the future. In other words, what, where, and how should they make use of their limited land resources? And this brings me to the anticipation that my research, managing change and uncertainty in Tonga, by achieving sustainable land management for resilient future, will hopefully contribute to this personal goal of helping the people of Tonga. Now, before I talk more about my research, I noticed that there are a few among us that are not from the Pacific region. So just to give a little context of Tonga and the Pacific region, I think Moana gave a really good video which showed the kind of like an aerial view, but I would like to zoom in and just contribute to what he has shared. So this is the Pacific Ocean, and you can see all the small island within the Pacific region, and Tonga is highlighted in yellow here with Niue, surrounded by Niue, Samoa, and Fiji. Yeah. I guess I'm not going to go much into details, but Tonga is divided into 5 main island groups, shown in your left side. And the layout of these island groups are shown here in this picture on the right. So the main island, Tongatapu, this is where capital Nuku'alofa is located. And then the rest of the islands are spread out. Again, just to give you some ideas, as we talk about Tonga, in 2021, our population was announced at 101,000 people, according to our national census. Not so much, right, compared to other small island developing states. At the same time, Tongatapu, the main island of Tongatapu, where Nuku'alofa, our capital, is located, housed 74% of that population. Now, into my research, I would like to share a bit about the research problem. And the geographical and geological formation and other natural characteristics of Tonga has made it vulnerable to natural hazards and disasters. These characteristics include Tonga being situated in the subduction zone. I think, again, more as shown in this picture. So we experience a lot of earthquake and other natural hazards, including landslides, volcanic activity. Moana showed the video of the Hunga Tonga Hunga Ha'apai, which I think is the most recent natural and natural hazards and disaster event that we experienced back in Tonga. Other events that is also an ongoing impacts of climate change are extreme weather events such as flooding, tropical cyclones, storm surges, and other impacts of the sea level rise. Tongatapu Island is relatively flat and low-lying in a low-lying area. Most of the urban area of Nuku'alofa, mind you, I said earlier, 74% of the population is located in Nuku'alofa, but this area of Nuku'alofa is majority of it is only 1 to 2 meters above sea level. So you can already picture the type of nuisance that we experience in this Nuku'alofa area. Tonga's vulnerability and high exposure to natural hazard has often brought about the disastrous event. As mentioned before, the volcanic eruption that resulted in a tsunami that affected some of the communities in Tonga. And also numerous events and cyclones that happened in past years. Other problems that I came across as I was doing my literature review is that a review of governance and legal, government, and policy from a land management perspective, although limited at this stage in my research, shows that Tonga is comparable with the usual trajectory and development phases seen elsewhere in the world, yet also experiencing the dilemma of finding a sustainable level of extraction of natural resources and still seeking to respond to the increasing risk of climate change. The bureaucracy of Tonga has an enormous task to meet the growing number of international agreements the country has signed up for, refining the national legal framework and policy instrument, providing the budget resources to enable this institution to carry out their mandates and to use the legal and policy instrument to effectively achieve sustainable land management. However, there is an increasing evidence that there is an inconsistency between what the expected outcome of the comprehensive legal instrument and policy foundation with the actual and practical reality of what is happening in Tonga. Literature shown that Tonga's land legislation is unable to accommodate ongoing change, specifically the social and economic changes, and have recommended to the need for land laws and policy reform so that the land tenure can adapt to contemporary Tongan society. And just to show some visualization, although this is very small in number, to show a complete picture of all the issues. The picture here on the left, we have comprehensive legal and policies for to make sure that Tonga has a healthy and clean environment. Yet you still see a lot of dumping of illegal dumping of rubbish in some available land, but also burning. We have policies that is supposed to tell people that these are not acceptable. You can see the picture of the flooding. Although we have had a large amount of money being put into Tonga to help with drainage systems on the road and also all of those infrastructure, and to help people in low-lying area to not to experience such a disastrous. The picture here and on the bottom shows a wetland in Tonga, but you can also see houses being built in this unlivable areas. So to put these issues into conceptual framework, just to give us make it easier for us to imagine, as mentioned earlier, why is it that the comprehensive land governance in Tonga are not showcasing what it's expected or anticipated to produce in reality? Therefore, I have three different questions in my research that will help me, hopefully, fill in the gaps and I guess to understand the dilemma that I have shared with you guys. And the first one is, what is the status of land management in Tonga? I guess, in other words, what are the different factors that contribute to land management in Tonga? So things like, such as the natural state of Tonga, geographical climate and such, the land tenure system, including ownership and land uses, but also the legal and policy instrument that I've mentioned. Second question is, what are the drivers and indirecting dynamics of land management in Tonga? And I guess this is the core of my research. I would like to identify and to understand what are the national and international drivers of land use changes and land management changes in Tonga. Last question, with the gained knowledge from question 1 and question 2, I would like to see how can Tonga then transition into a more sustainable land management system. And of course, therefore, I anticipate that if I do come up with such answer and plan, Tonga will be more resilient. Lastly, of course, these research, I anticipate to contribute both in theories and knowledges, and also in practices such as policy development and project to make Tonga a more resilient island country. Mahalo.
Can I invite the panelists to come in front? We'll just grab a chair each, please. We open the floor for questions. So the format of the question and answer session would be, we will take one question one by one. Please, when you ask your question, introduce yourself, and your question to be brief and to the point, and you indicate to whom you are addressing that question. And the question should be related to the study area and the study region, the subject matter and the country as well. So I know you have the panelists here, you have heard them. Please do ask the question. Yes, sir. Please, yeah, you can just speak from there. You can speak from there. Yeah, yeah.
My question is for Viljami. So I'm from and I'm very interested in like the sign people so to predicted some cycle anything else. We might be into look at about society. So what kind of other sign do you look this is your research anthropological research what is the field of your research?
Yeah.
Geographic or-
Yeah, partly geographic. It's interdisciplinary.
So it is. What field? Geography.
Geography.
Geography. Next question. Yes, sir.
My name is Mark Love from Griffith University, Responsible Centre of Applied Anthropologist. Been working in water 7 years, before that I was applied linguistics and various others. I just have a question, apologies for being put in this way. Sorry. Thank you. Have you had a look at Paradisec? It's a linguistic resource that Australian National University looked after. It's housed ANU, but it's not actually owned by ANU. It has over 1,300 specific languages over from ANUs, from early colonial interaction. Whereas all the way to now, lots of linguists have got lots of.
What's the name of the database?
It's called Paradisec. Paradisec. I was just wondering if you have a look to see what it meant for
Have you seen it? Have you used the database?
No, I have not.
Well, very good. So
Okay,
that's,
so
that's,
Yes,
definitely
thank you.
if you could forward this. Next question. Yes, sir.
Thank you. My name is Steve, and I'm here with this city. And I am a colleague. I'm just curious to find out in your learnings how the stereotype of the prejudice against what we term resilience in the episteme of Western versus your own journey in resilience in your study and how you unpacking. This comes to the issue of habitability. Well, you spoke very briefly, Celia, about communities living in a watery environment. And that also speaks to their resilience. But from a Western episteme, it speaks to a lot of vulnerable, by their own indicators. So development tends to look at it in a very poor light. But from our indigenous traditional knowledge of the knowledge perspective, our resilience is born for those localized conflicts. How are you grappling with Western versus your own local understanding of knowledge systems that makes you resilient?
Yes, Celia. And then
Thank you, Peter. And that is a very valid question. In my research, unfortunately, I have just been introduced into the idea. I mean, I knew about indigenous knowledge before, and I've heard about the westernized knowledge, but I never came to look deep into it until this year when I joined the NPOC program. There's a lot of learning and realization. And as mentioned, I forgot to mention that I am not yet in my data collection stage, which is set for early next year. And I guess a 15-minute presentation does not give you the opportunity to share all the different aspects and components of my research, but it is one of the goal that I would like to highlight is I would like to highlight the differences between the westernized knowledge and the local knowledge. And I guess there's a process of deconstruction that has to be done. And I am planning to do that. Yeah, and stay tuned when some of our journals, which is a requirement for for USP, and hopefully in the future, I will definitely share that important component. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to share that earlier this year I was back home doing my fieldwork, and I was talking to elders from different islands back home in the capital. So during the group discussion, I could easily identify who was educated and who grew up in the island from the responses they gave me on the question of climate change, sea level rise, and the effect, how the community has been affected. And there's these old men sitting on the side while we were debating about how resilient we are as Tuvaluan. And all the people talking are these people with Western qualifications. Well, that's how I term it, like, formal qualification. And this guy, after our discussion, said, he's not that old, but he grew up in the island. He said, my grandparents, my parents, and myself grew up in the island. We never go hungry. We survive storms and all these natural disasters that happen in my island. And that shows our resilience. And while you are debating about the vulnerability of the Tuvaluan to the issue of sea level rise, I think there are options for us to talk rather than talking about migration. Now that's started a very fierce debate between the elders that were inside the room during, but it gives me a sense of appreciation to how some of the people in the island still strongly believe in how we Tuvaluan can adapt despite the issue of climate change and sea level rise. So just from that conversation, it clicks on how I can define or look at resilience in how it's been talked about in this space and how it's been talked about in the local space.
Thank you very much. I think we need to round it up. I want to thank the panelists, and I want to thank all of you for coming here, supporting them. I think these are very important thematic area that they are working on, and I want to wish them very best in getting the research done, contributing to policy making, as well as graduating with a PhD and making a difference in your respective countries. Let's thank them in the usual manner. Thank you. I think they're waiting for the next keynote session, so let's walk down. Thank you. Naka.
Fine, that's the one.